So I'm guessing you met me here because you are looking at buying houses, and of course, nobody wants to overpay. Before I jump in, if I haven't given you a hard copy, I can give you a PDF copy of this Smart Home Buyer. And I know sometimes when people have already purchased a house, they don't feel like they need to look at this information, but there really is like a lot of gold in here. And so I'm really highlighting a chapter in here called Finding the Best Deals. And so by no means do I mean to like read these pages to you. I'm just saying that if you want this more, if you like it in written form, which I do, it's how I learn, I do have this available for you. However, if you prefer for me to just jump into it, let's do that right now. So I'm going to just go a little bit beyond the basics, because a part of that is because some of this is already covered in the book, but because you're jumping in at video format, I will tell you, of course, naturally, I'm supposed to tell you, like, you need a realtor and you should be pre-approved. So we're just going to go a little bit deeper than those things, which is what can we see online in terms of search terms and in terms of pictures. So let's jump in. First thing we're going to talk about is limited number of pictures. We've all seen these properties where there's one picture or there's four pictures. There's just like not much of a story being told. Sometimes even the description's really short, and that's interesting. And what of course happens is everybody else skips that house because they're not telling us anything. They're not convincing us to set up a showing, but you're trying to find the best deals. So slow down and look at those pictures and what you have in front of you a little bit closer and see if it's meeting your criteria. A lot of those houses will sell 15 to 20% less than a similar house down the street, just because of the way it's being presented with that lack of pictures. A lot of times that's indicative that there's a renter there and that the listing agent just didn't feel like giving you a picture was going to be helpful. When rooms are really messy and cluttered, we often shy away from just showing it at all, just because the story is not helpful in that case. But you know that there's probably less showings happening on a house like that, so you may want to request the showing. And on that note, my second piece is the quality of the pictures. We are very influenced, right? This is like a good listing agent or somebody who's even selling their house on their own understands your selling lifestyle. And so again, you're looking for a deal. So wouldn't we want to almost like go towards the houses that are not conveying that lifestyle storyline? It's still a building, it still may meet all your criteria, but those pictures are fuzzy, they're dark, they're clearly taken with a cell phone. That listing agent may not understand the importance of professional, high quality photos. And what you can do is see it as an opportunity, because once again, we know that those houses tend to sell for less money than other ones. And of course, there's always caveats to everything I'm saying, so it's not like any hard or fast rules here. But again, people are probably not asking to see them because there's an equally nice house down the street and the pictures are great and the staging is great and I'm really getting an idea of what that house looks like. And so everybody's skipping house A and they're going to B. There's your opportunity. So as we're looking through pictures, a lot of times people are not requesting to look at houses with a lot of clutter in them or messy or are vacant. And again, these are not good things for the seller, and they probably know that. This is the best that they can do. Either way, when that's presented that way, we perceive the space as small. So when it's cluttered full of stuff, it's like, well, what's happening here? Why don't they have room for their things? Your brain is just moving too quickly through things, and you're not going to stop and reflect on like where the advantage is there. But you should, because I'm giving you this tip that if you see a really cluttered house, it's still a house. It still doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it just because somebody owns a lot of things or isn't a good housekeeper. On the flip side, if the house is vacant, not that they're giving away the farm, right? Like there's a lot of situations in our life why we have to sell a house vacant with no furniture. The problem is, again, it's going to make certain rooms look smaller because the furniture isn't anchoring the space. It's not giving us a sense of spatial relationship. When we don't see a bedroom, we don't know how big the bed is. Again, a lot of people could be skipping that house just because they think it's small or something, like when it actually isn't. The next point is paint and flooring, which that's obviously subjective, like what is not a great paint color or is outdated flooring or bad shaped flooring. These are relatively easy and cheaper expenses in a property, and obviously everybody has their own selection and preferences. I always point out the pink room I'm in. I'll never forget the day I painted it, and my husband immediately said, well, the day we sell this house, that room needs to be painted. He hated it. So it's subjective, and I get it. Like from a selling point of view, this isn't the pink I would pick to sell a house. And we all want to say, oh, you know what? They'll know, they'll paint. It's one room. It doesn't matter. Mostly it doesn't matter if it's like one room, but I will give a quick example of when I was house shopping, and this was a long time ago. I remember seeing a gorgeous house in the Maple Grove, Plymouth area. Every room was lime green or bright orange. It was very Caribbean, very not of the aesthetic of Minnesota. It wasn't that I didn't know I could paint. I'm fully aware of paint. I was so overwhelmed by 3 levels of paint. It was the quantity of painting. It just felt intense to me. So again, there was an opportunity. And again, I won't normally like talk you too much out of a paint color typically as a listing agent, especially if it's just one room and it's not too garish. And again, that's subjective, and that sounded really harsh and judgy, but there are just colors that aren't going to vibe with everybody. And so, flooring, you know, if it's ripped up, torn, there's your opportunity to maybe get a little bit of a deal on it. So let's think about search terms. These are things you could set up on your own depending on where you're looking for houses, or you could ask your realtor to customize the search to just focus on these terms. I guess I wouldn't recommend that necessarily, but just things to be mindful of. So the first thing, and this one's probably the most obvious on the list, is REO properties, which means bank-owned properties, foreclosures, and short sales. The first thing is a short sale. If you're not familiar with that term, there's nothing short about a short sale. It actually might be one of the longest transactions we can go into. The short word is deriving from the fact the person wants to sell their house short of what they owe on their mortgage. Of course, they have to have approval, and those transactions can actually just fall apart. And so the only time you want to move forward with a short sale as a buyer is a person who's very, very flexible with their time. So if you do need to get into a new house by a certain time, you might want to avoid short sales as a rule of thumb. There's not a lot of them out there at the current moment of me recording this video, so it's kind of a non-issue as I'm saying that out loud. However, they could come back and they could be a thing, and so this will be pertinent again. Foreclosures are not necessarily a long or a short process. They're normally, again, they're owned by the bank, and the bank isn't, I think there's a lot of misconception out there where it's like, oh, the bank is kind of willing to give this away. They don't want to own real estate. Yeah, to an extent though, they're trying to get their money back on something that they lost. So there's an opportunity there, but it's something to get like wildly excited about. Like, well, I'm going to really be able to take advantage of this. Just like any other seller, they've got a bottom line. And yes, they can be a slightly cumbersome to work with, but your real estate agent will will work with you to work through those details. Things I want to bring up is estate sales and relocation sales. Now, relocation might be a little bit harder for you to figure out like who's actually relocating. Sometimes agents do disclose that in our private remarks to each other. However, again, you'd have to work with a realtor to determine that, and that would be a really hard request if someone asked me. But there's sometimes just tells, like they'll say, oh, house is only on the market because they're moving to Montana due to a job transfer. There could be an opportunity there. And then in terms of estate sales, I do think people tend to think like people are just willing to give away the farm, when that's not necessarily true. Yes, there can be opportunity on estate sales. That's where somebody's passed away or has moved into a senior living facility or something of that nature, where the current owner wasn't probably the person who lived there, though, you know, it could be like somebody's childhood home that they're now selling. I think we just tend to think there's so much opportunity. In my actual personal experience, a lot of times people I'm working with, they're in absolutely no hurry. They don't want the house anymore, but they're not willing to give it away just to benefit somebody else. There's money to be made, especially when we're in a seller's market, and the estate component isn't like really driving it. Like I've had buyer's agents act like, well, this person just has to sell. No, they don't. Their holding costs are so low. they can wait a little bit longer and, you know, wait for things or whatever. So it's nice to know something's on a estate sale. There might be an opportunity there. Sometimes they're more complicated because there's a lot of people involved in the will or that are responsible for selling. So that's not always necessarily an easy transaction. Sometimes it's extremely easy. So they're just things to think about. They're opportunities to be had. If you have any other questions about real estate, want a copy of this book, please go to iheartmplsminneapolishomes.com. I'd love to see you there, whether you're starting your home search, want a copy of the book, have questions for me. I'm always available, and I am a Twin Cities full-time agent. Thank you for making it to the end.